go, Frank. Well done. And Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan. Welcome, everyone. Meeting called to order. Any public comment before we get started? Hearing none. Jamie is here from DTS, and she really wants to use the commission as a sounding board, as she said, as we were just chatting before the meeting started, that she really knew that we were thinking about some of the privacy issues, and so she just wanted to share some of their thinking. And this is the first privacy policy, right, Jamie? There isn't one quote unquote a current one, right? This one is the brand new.
So this is the first step at a county-wide position. There are numerous situational policies, which we'll discuss as we, are trying to figure out how we're going to corral everything under a single umbrella. No small feat. But this is the first county-wide effort, first toe in the water.
Great. Okay. Well, without further ado, because certainly you're welcome to stay the whole time, Jamie, but and Richard, I know you're on, so welcome. And
I also just wanted to say hello to everyone, Mary. This is Bryna Helfer.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks. I'm here to hear all your good feedback on the privacy policy. This is a priority of the county managers, so thank you.
Oh, our pleasure. So over to you, Jamie.
You're on mute, Jimmy.
I hate when I do that.
Oh, listen, Jamie, we all do it. We all do it.
This time, we would be the pros at not starting to talk under mute. Anyway, for those I haven't met, and as Mary said, I'm Jamie Lees. I work for Jack and Richard in the county's Technology Services Department as our first Chief Data Officer. And that has been an amazing experience, embracing many things, including now privacy. And so this is an area where I have learned a great deal from my colleagues from other jurisdictions, and I'm now looking to get some input from your perspective. So what we're going to talk about this evening briefly is what the county is thinking so far in the way of privacy principles and privacy policy. We'll talk a little bit more about what each of those are and how we're distinguishing. And what we'd like to have is some conversation with you on, do these sound familiar and resonate with you, or are we missing some things, or does it, do they raise some, we talked earlier before the meeting started about being wary of technology. Are we hitting that? So let me get to next slide. There we go. So the reason we are talking about this, two themes are driving the development of this work. First, we've been handling personal information for years as being an operational necessity. This is, in some cases, we need this information in order to do the business of government. What is changing and what makes this inherently risky is the new technologies out there that are collecting data at an extraordinary rate and doing so digitally, which exposes us to cybersecurity risk in particular. So that is sort of the operational aspect of it. The other aspect is what Bryna was referring to, the engagement piece. In order for our services to work for you, you need to trust us. So transparency and responsible handling are key to making sure we're doing what you're expecting us to do in an area that's a little ambiguous. So Jimmy, the privacy.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you mind going to a full screen view?
Sure.
Display that way. I think the audience can see the entire slide. There you go. Thank you. Sorry to be. There
Sorry.
You go. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. It's an odd view on my laptop where I can't see anybody. I'm just looking at my slides, so it's
right. Of course.
It's a weird thing to just be looking at the blank screen. Mm-hmm. So the privacy principles we're going to talk about should be reflecting what you expect of us, of your government. And then the policy is filling in the specific gaps where federal and state regulations are undefined. In many ways, they simply haven't kept pace with all of the technologies out there as yet. So before we discuss the actual principles and policy, I wanted to give you a sense of the information that we are collecting. Maybe you've provided some, maybe you haven't, but to give you some context, one of the first tasks we did was to look at a high level, what information are we collecting across the different departments? And we've broken this out into two categories: information that you affirmatively provide to us, and information that we collect automatically from you. So I've got some visuals here, but I'm going to go into a little more detail in the next screens. So some of the information that you provide to us affirmatively is things like contact information, your name, address, phone number, email, when you're requesting a location-specific service or you want to return reply. Those would be some examples of why we would need it. Other times we would be collecting bank account or credit card information when you're initiating a financial transaction. In some cases, we need biographical information, demographic information, age, gender, language, income, when we need that information in order to qualify you for a service. And last, identification information, driver's license numbers, social security numbers, any sort of unique ID when we are specifically needing to verify your identity. So this is not a comprehensive list, as you can imagine, but it is to give you a sense of what we're talking about. Before I move on from this, I want to add that one of the positions that we're taking in this privacy discussion is to only collect this information if we have to have it operationally, and to only require it in those cases, to tell you what we're using it for and to use it for that. There will be times when we might request information from you optionally. So you would still be providing it, but for example, biographical information might not be required for a service, but we ask you for it because we want to improve our program area. We want to know who is using or who is not using a service, in which case we would let you know that that information is optional to provide, and you would not see any degradation of service or any impact to your service if you chose not to provide it. Then the second category is information we automatically collect and receive from you. So for many, many years, we collect a lot of information like everybody else does from our website. What device and browser type and operating system you're using, the date, time, and location you accessed our site, the pages, applications, or forms that you used. Now we're finding that we're making some increasing use of video, photographic, or audio recordings of individuals or individual property. And we're collecting information about your devices in order to, for example, give you wireless internet. So those are the types of information we're collecting automatically. And one of the commitments we have in this space is to make sure you know that that information is being collected, and to confirm and communicate that none of this automatically collected information is uniquely identifying. And we are committing not to combine it with anything else so as to identify you, if that makes sense. So there's one more area of information collection that the policy addresses, and that's information that we get from third-party contractors, people with whom we do business to support our government operations. So for example, when you pay a bill online, that is through a third-party service, and we get the payment, but you're using a third-party service. We use tools across the county for monitoring, security monitoring, forms and surveys, web traffic monitoring. And these are key to efficiency and focusing on our core business and supporting the companies that have tools that make this these operations smoother. Some of the challenges in this area is that these vendors have their own privacy policies, and we don't necessarily have input into that policy, especially as we are starting our program now. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, procurement processes could include aligning the privacy policies and making sure that they are consistent or that we are very clear where they might not be. And in the meantime, we would commit to making sure you knew that the privacy policies for a vendor existed and to connect you with them where possible so that you would be able to make your own privacy decisions about doing that business online. So that's the kind of information we're getting and how we're getting it. Now I think I'm ready to dive into the privacy principles. So based on the information that we organizationally collect and the responsibility as well as the requirement to handle that information appropriately, we developed 4 guiding principles. These again are all based on managing a trust relationship with the public. So it's particularly here that we are aspiring. This is where we want to be. This is what the organization we think we should be regarding personal information. So I'm briefly going to walk through those. I welcome any questions and reactions. The first one we've already mentioned, minimum necessary. We only want to collect personal information that we have to have. If we don't have the information, it does not pose a cybersecurity risk. It does not pose a trust risk. So let's be thoughtful in what we collect and why. The next one is quality. If we are going to go to the effort of asking for your personal information and you are going to entrust it with us, we want to make sure that we have methodology that allows it to be accurate so that when we use it for these purposes, we are hitting the right things. We are learning what we're supposed to learn from the personal information and offering the kinds of services you would expect. The next one is transparency. This is a key piece to the puzzle. It's not about what we do, it's about communicating what we do. Why are we collecting it? What are we doing with it? Who will see it? All of those things, and communicating that information out to you. You're going to hear a little bit more about how we would propose to do that next. Stewardship is the final principle, and that's our operational commitment. We make sure we secure and protect, and this is a big job, as Richard and Jack and Fairfax Public Schools can attest. You have to work pretty hard to keep up. So our commitment in a privacy perspective is to make sure we are doing our best to keep up with cybersecurity risk and the ever-growing field of what is considered personal information. Did I hear a question?
Yes, Jackie has a question. Jackie? Jackie, I think you're on mute. She put it in the chat as well. And then she can follow up. She said she'd like to know how law enforcement collected information is categorized. An example, the body cams, traffic cams, the privacy issues in that category. How would you?
So I don't think that the principles are categories, but the technologies would each be looked at individually. That's one of the, you're asking a huge and big and important question. The overall policy says, here's the guardrails that we're looking to follow. And then we are going to have very specific examination of a particular technology or practice or method. So in the case of body-worn cameras, I know public safety is already well into what are we collecting, how are we using it, and looking to communicate that out with the public and in coordination with this privacy discussion. So if you're picturing what is being worn as a camera, then information that's being collected is being automatically collected. You're not providing it, right? So it would fall into that automatically collected category. We would then commit to communicating exactly what we're using that information for, how long we're keeping it, who has access to it, and what we have done to make sure that privacy of people uninvolved in a criminal activity can expect. and even involved in a criminal activity.
Jamie, you just mentioned how long we keep it. Is that one of the principles, or where do you cover that in terms of what the framework is for sundown data? What the
So I
commitment
think it would
is.
fall under the stewardship principle, but the actual retention would be based on law. So the Virginia Records Act, if it specifies the type of information it is, we would follow it to that. If it does not, we would keep it as short. The aim, the aspirational goal, and these principles would be to keep it as short a time as we need it to use it, and then dispose of it carefully to make sure it's not at risk of being captured during the disposal process.
And that sundown framing would be communicated as linking to the transparency principle.
Exactly. So the next thing, and maybe this is a good segue to the next slide, the policy is the how do we do this? And these questions we're committing to address them in the policy document. And the means by which we're doing that situationally is through something we're calling a privacy impact assessment. So why are we collecting this personal information is answered in some detail. What exactly are we collecting? How are we collecting it? How are we managing quality? How are we managing disposal? How are we communicating? What happens after we have it? Who else is seeing it? Is it being shared? And that assessment would then be shared out with the public. Probably a shortened version of it because it's a lengthy process, but a privacy impact assessment report would be shared out so that everybody would have the same information. And the platform we're looking to do that on is a new privacy site. So you don't have to find privacy on every page that you go to or every digital service that you interact with, or even when you're filling out a paper form or calling somebody or participating in social media. The privacy arlingtonva.us website we would propose to be the one stop. It would have this policy, the county-wide one, but also body-worn cameras, video, departmental specific things like how libraries handles the information that they have about who has borrowed what. Some departments are more stringent than the law requires at this point, especially with a fair amount of ambiguity. And some are regulated by law, so they're very clear on here's the information and what we have to do with it based on existing law. Okay. So other things that would be on this website, we mentioned the policy already. We would have these department-specific policies and technology-specific policies, the privacy impact assessment reports, and then also, as we mentioned before, any third-party policies that people should be aware of. There will also be the ability to interact with us, ask the questions. So this presentation wouldn't be the only time you would have a chance to do that. So I want to move on a little bit to when we do share this information. In some cases, as I think you have already interacted with in this ITech environment, you know about these, maybe they are familiar. In some cases, we are required to share information. Public records are defined, so certain things are considered a public record and must be shared upon request or are proactively shared. The Virginia Freedom of Information Act, so FOIA requests, if it is not specifically exempted, it can be requested and again might be proactively published if it is not exempt. And of course, lawful court orders such as subpoenas. So by default, we are not just an open organization where every department can see everybody else's information, including law enforcement. They would still be required to have a subpoena to get information that they didn't collect as well. On the flip side of that coin is information we're never going to share. So if it is regulated by law, such as the health records law, HIPAA, then we are not going to share it. There are other protected groups that have specific law around them, such as children or victims of domestic and sexual violence. In these cases, we will always, when this information needs to be collected, we will always aggregate it up to a level that does not allow for personal identification. And then there's the middle ground, situational information sharing. So this is when we choose to share personal information with non-county departments. Some reasons for this would be regional partnerships. So we have a public safety and emergency response network. A 911 call might go to somebody in Alexandria and vice versa. And we have a council of governments that is a regional organization. In order to handle situations that are regional in nature, we might share our information there. We partner with university research labs. For example, if we're working on an equity initiative, we would be sharing this information of age and gender and things like that in order to measure how we're doing. And then, of course, we have contracted third parties who provide services on behalf of Arlington County. If the service they're providing requires this information, they would have access to it. And I think the default position is that we would never share individually identifying information with any of these partners unless, and the unless would have to be specified, and we would manage these relationships through data sharing agreements so that both parties are clear what's being shared, to what use it can be put, how it will be disposed of, how it will be used and not used. So that's the sharing spectrum. And I think that covers everything that is in this first pass of the principles and policies. So I think we're ready to turn it over to you to hear from questions that you might have on it, but also how these tenets resonate or miss the mark with you. And Bryna, I think, is interested in engaging you in a discussion of how do we get this kind of message and feedback out to a broader community. So I'm going to stop presenting so I can see faces and hands and chats again, if there are any of those.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jamie. Open it up to the commission. Questions, comments?
This is David Husband. I wanted to say that, first of all, this all sounds wonderful. As you know, I'm a big advocate of the county taking privacy seriously, and this all sounds good. Two questions, one of which is easy. Did we share the draft policy? Did you share the draft policy with us and I'm just not seeing it, or not yet?
That has not been shared, as it's a work in progress internally. I think that's a phase 2.
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything I was missing. Okay.
I know you like to read ahead.
I do. I like to read along. I like to read ahead. I like to read behind. And then the second thing is, all this stuff sounds really good. Sounds like you guys are following some of the best practices, best principles. It's a lot of work is what it sounds like. How are you going to actually get all these data sharing agreements together, list all the privacy policies? What's your staff and your timeline?
So none of that implementation stuff is worked out. I'm not going to give you the details of it. What I would say we're doing now is working with the county manager to say, given everything that's going on, what relative priority is this? It's clear that in order to have a privacy program, we need to resource it. That has not prevented us over the last year and a half, though, from making incremental progress. Drafting a policy, drafting the principles, doing a high-level inventory, developing the privacy impact assessment, driving an internal work plan, and proposing to do this work situationally, project-based. So we're still learning and growing and getting feedback from folks like you to say, if there are lessons learned and best practices, let's be informed with them. When we have the resources to scale it up, we'll know what we're scaling. We've also adopted, in theory, the NIST privacy framework.
I was about to ask about what regulations or laws or framework you were looking at. Okay.
It came out at the perfect time for us. And so it has given us a work plan and a series of recommendations to put forward to the county manager to consider. How do we do this? When do we do this? And, how do we become a privacy informed organization?
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Jackie, you're next.
Yes. Could you say some more about the high-level inventory? One of the issues, of course, that we've had on systems in general is that we don't have an inventory of all of the IT systems that we have because they're so decentralized. I would imagine you would have the same problem if you said, we want to talk about all the data collection. That's also highly decentralized. So could you talk a little bit about how you're conducting that inventory and how far you've gotten with it and what you think it will be your time frame?
Yeah, it's like I've paid you a quarter to ask all the good questions. So what we have done, I would consider, and when I said high level, I would also add more informal. So it is not in a system. We have not invested in software or developed a solution to collect this. What we did was came up with an interview, and we met with representatives in every county department who reached out to their people, and we said, what do you know that you collect in the way of personal information? How is it categorized? Who manages access? Does it have a retention schedule? So we asked a fairly lengthy interview, and then we compiled that organizationally to get a picture of what we're talking about here. How much, how many departments, are there challenges? Records retention is a challenge. How long do we keep it? When do we get rid of it? And so from that, we were able to identify what we perceived as gaps between the principles where we would like to be and some operational challenges that we face of a wide nature. So it was really for the purpose of informing the principals and an internal work plan, but one of the recommendations is an actual inventory. So to catalog that personal information that we have, the risks associated with it and such. As you said, that is an enormous undertaking. And as David made a point, that would have to be resourced in order to be done. So we just have to see where it fits in. It remains a challenge just as it does with apps.
Did you do of your any kind of a rough spreadsheet rather than database, but a rough indicator of what some of the answers are to your categories of questions, like what where data is stored and how long it's stored and who what the security issues are for protecting it, those kinds of things? Do you get from your interviews, did you get a good sense of what the key challenges are?
I mean, I'd like to think so. What I know is there's plenty we don't know. One representative or even the three or so that we have from our environmental services department isn't going to cover 1,100 people's work. It's just, there will be surprises for sure. What I feel was, given the level of effort and staff commitment that we were able to dedicate, it is a representative swath, and it compares well with what other jurisdictions have encountered that we've been, looking at to model, and compares well with this NIST privacy framework. The things that they're telling us to do organizationally, we have discussed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Get the fuck out of my shit.
Could someone mute? Thank you. Mike, you're next.
All right. So, Jamie, this is a subject of great interest to me. Glad to have you here. I took the time at the beginning of this pandemic, when we all thought it was going to be about 8 weeks long or maybe 12, to write down a lot of thoughts about privacy protection at the county government level and about the public trust dimensions of this. So I just want to recommend that to you as something to look at. Much of what you said is sort of along the same lines, but two quick points I'd like to raise. And one is, I assume what you're saying is that what privacy policies and practices exist were shaped to avoid violating federal or state law, which of course is necessary. But in my judgment, it's not nearly sufficient because the federal regime is so incomplete. And so I would ask the local government to take a position that's a little more like a consumer protection position regarding its citizenship and the folks who are conducting business in the county. And I'd say most particularly, I don't doubt that commercial providers have their own privacy policies, but they do not get to subject Arlington and Arlington citizens to them of their own volition. I mean, Arlington could say, we're seeking a service provider for this information technology support service, and we will only consider bids that have certain privacy provisions in them. So I thought it sounded to me like we had that a little backwards. You know what I mean? That we don't need to contort ourselves to fit into the sometimes less than balanced privacy policies that exist with commercial software products and service providers. And just to say the last piece on that, any strategy that's primarily about legal risk minimization, I would say is necessary but far from complete. You know, we don't want to just avoid being in the wrong end of a lawsuit here. We want to do what seems right for the citizens of Arlington. And that may be more than the state has done or more than the federal government has done.
Mike, I thank you for those comments. I think they really strike what a lot of people that were in this internal data steering group were saying as well. The law is as far as we have gone because, of course, we have to. You know, to Jackie's point, we didn't find huge smoking guns where we're just sitting with data out on tables or anything like that. It's much more subtle than that. It's a cultural shift that speaks to the ambiguity of the law. There's simply not enough law to match all of the stuff we're collecting. I run our county's open data portal, and if Department A says publish these columns and Department B says publish those, but I can join these tables, then I can't respect everybody's wishes. We had no guardrails. And so we need a position that is a starting point. We will have to refine it over time, but I think we need that position. And with the commercial providers with whom we do business, again, I think before this was a thing, you were sort of captive. If you wanted to do business, you took that. Now we can be more proactive to say, what are you collecting? Do you even need to collect all of this information? Do you need to keep it after you've processed the transaction? We have the ability to wield more influence in those discussions, but that's more of a day forward approach. We're still going to have to look at our current environment and figure out what options we have to address squeaky wheels, bad policies, things that don't seem in alignment with our own principles.
And Jamie, you've of course generated comments in the chat. And then Martha has a question as well. I think the first David's question was, who are you benchmarking against?
My favorites are Seattle, San Francisco, and Santa Clara. They just have a lot of great tools and are super good partners in sharing. But I meet almost, I think monthly, pretty regularly with the Future of Privacy Forum civic data privacy leaders. And so I'm hearing from all over the country individual best practices along the way and people's journeys. So there's a lot, people who are not as far along as we are, or jurisdictions who are way further along. So it's really helpful. And people always have to be picky choosy. Nobody can boil the ocean. We're a local jurisdiction, right? So what people have prioritized in some areas, they may be far advanced to us, and in some areas we may be the ones sharing.
So you got a seat on the Future of Privacy Forum's Municipal Civic Council, the group that they put together?
Yes.
Okay, good. I remember talking to you about that back when the Open Data Advisory Group was meeting. Perfect.
Great. All right, Martha?
Hi, I've had a business license in Arlington for 40 years or more. And it was clear to me after the first few years that they were capturing and selling my data. So I would get, and no one was denying it. So I want to know, are you still capturing and selling data?
I have not. So back to Jackie's, who did you talk to? My conversations thus far have been limited to Arlington County government and not elected official offices. So I don't have direct information, but with a lead like this, I would say I need to reach out to them and say, it's one of our principles here. We're not selling or making commercial gain. Business license records are public records. There is information on our open data portal about them. So I'm not sure what information was.
I think that the state aggregated it and then sold it. So it might not have been
State aggregated, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I would ask if, Martha, if you would look at the county's open data portal and see what's there, because every individual business, it's not aggregated. Every individual business license is published and updated regularly. I don't think it's personally identifying, but I think it is an important recognition that businesses will have a different sense of privacy than individuals. And so if you have a concern with what's out there, it would be something that would be very helpful for me to hear and understand, so that we can make sure at least Arlington is in line, and then I can see maybe what the state is doing as well.
All right, I will look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Jamie, Denise had a question, and Denise, if you want to add, will the plan be sent out to ITech in addition to NIST, for review once you have.
So I'm going to defer to Bryna there on, both the timing and the scope of the communications. Bryna, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, one of the things that once you get through your substantive conversation, which is, these are really helpful comments, very interested in your feedback that you're providing right now. We also do want to talk about what would the engagement process look like for the broader community. NIST is a federal agency. They're not going to comment on our local policy. I doubt it. But if someone wants to send it to them, sure. But ITech, absolutely, ODEC, but really want to open it up, and we want to figure out what's the best way to do that, thinking maybe sometime in the summer, early summer, taking all this feedback, cleaning it up a bit, getting out a draft. So let's see if there's any more substantive comments, and then we can shift to that conversation. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Great, thanks. Other questions, comments? John?
Yeah, I would like to first associate with many of the comments that have already been said in terms of driving us forward beyond what the law requires. The Electronic Frontier Foundation talks about how you can't trust no one, but you need to pick who to trust with your data. And for many aspects of life, Arlington County citizens have absolutely no choice but to trust the county government. And so I think the level of care and protection you take with our data needs to reflect that lack of choice. I would say, however, in these conversations, where I often see a conflict is between performance of the services that you offer and the data that you have that are driving those services. If you are collecting data, and if we can trust you to only use it for appropriate purposes, not lose it, not leak it, then I would be comfortable with more retention and more uses if the performance of the services that the county offered to me were able to be better, right? People often will express frustrations about their interactions with the county, rightly or wrongly, but getting the performance level of the services that you provide to the citizenry up, I think is a very valuable goal and outcome, and needs to be weighed against the self-imposed restriction on collecting the data necessary to drive and provide those services. Again, that requires a great, as you have put, great deal of trust that you are in fact protecting the data effectively, not using it for inappropriate purposes, monitoring the internal users of that data to make sure they are, individually not going outside the rules and breaking the policy, that sort of insider threat type situation. But I just wanted to make that performance point because I think it's one that's often lost when we're focused so much on the importance of privacy.
So John, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, I think there are some departments that really are evidence-based, data-driven in their service delivery more than others. And I think, we are trying to understand how to use data in a way that does that. So I really appreciate that comment. So thank you.
Agreed, John. That is a helpful perspective. I am looking also to set up a fledgling data analytics shop. I'm the chief data officer, so there's an inherent, crunch. How do you leverage the data, but you do so ethically? And I think it's clear it can be done. It's not that hard. It's not whether you do it, it's how you do it. And having these guardrails frees me up to say, partner department, I don't want that data. You have to roll that up higher, because even though I'm trying to help you, I don't need to know that it was John or it was Jamie who did this. I just need to know a person did this. And so that's part of the cultural shift, the data literacy conversation that includes a lot of training, not just in the tools, but in the information that's being handled.
Yeah. And then finally, I want to foot stomp Mike's point earlier about contracts and buying. There should be absolutely no contract that's let for any sort of service that does not absolutely require the vendor to live by our rules regarding data and privacy. We can influence the availability of commercial services that respect people's privacy by buying them with our tax dollars. And that makes privacy easier for everybody who's operating in the commercial space. And throwing in with the state, buying organizations, and I know they have their preferred buying lists, and making those terms and competitive evaluation factors and all that, I think is a hugely important aspect of getting this right long term, because it'll open up the number of services available to us that that comply with those principles.
Exactly so. Heard and noted. Thank you.
Josh?
Sure. Hi, Jamie. My name is Josh O'Farah. I'm a member of this committee and a Presidential Innovation Fellow detailed to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm an engineer, a data engineer. And so I actually design and build data systems for collecting operational data and cultural data from a workforce and operations data from a business organization, a large organization, the Department of Veterans Affairs. So my question is, how are you thinking about approaching, less from the privacy perspective, but more from the operational perspective? How are you approaching the problem of data interoperability and breaking down the silos between departments to ensure that the data that you're collecting is able to be used in such a way as you're able to create data products from disparate sources, recognizing that different systems use different identifiers, different systems have different ways of referring to the same thing. And are you taking an approach that maybe it makes sense to create a canonical system of record for entity identifiers, or some other approach? I would just like to hear you talk a little bit more about how you think about data interoperability.
So I think I appreciate the question and the relationship to privacy, as well as its distinction from, I think we, from a privacy perspective, need to be thoughtful that we don't want to connect an individual person across multiple systems. We're not looking to track the person. And at the same time, we need the ability to understand how our systems can be, where that information can be compared, so that we know both the risk and the opportunity. I think the topic is a little bigger than I can cover in this space, but I would say what we do now, getting back to Jackie's point of trying to get an application inventory and a privacy inventory, having all of the county's data be interoperable and documented and maybe in a data warehouse or similar is a big reach. And what we tend to do, the approach that I am supportive of right now is situational. Have it be business need driven. When we need to connect several systems to achieve a performance goal or a programmatic goal, to understand who we're serving and who we're not, then we do that situationally. And we have some great spaces to do that our technology services department provides. Other than that, trying to connect for the sake of it is something we just don't have a lot of bandwidth for. It's not that it's not valuable and wouldn't be informative. It's just, I think we're a little more initiative driven at this point, and that makes sense from our resource standpoint.
No, of course. I agree that should be your approach, that you should limit what you're doing in terms of improving interoperability to the problems that are at hand. What I would recommend is if you get to the point where you have to think about data interoperability, don't forget this commission.
Yes.
I've done a lot of work to develop data standards for interoperable data in post-secondary education, and now we're trying to build analytics for the federal government. And I think local government is very similar, where we want to be developing essentially a set of machinery for the measurement of government operations. Open data is interesting, but open data is only interesting to the extent that it informs citizens about things that they care about. And I think when we think about operational data, we have the ability to do that. But in order to get good metrics from government systems around operations, you get into this interesting puzzle of interoperability, and that has a very obvious and I think interesting relationship with privacy. But anyway, I won't dwell on that anymore.
I will take that as an invitation to return to your ranks at some
That's right.
time. I look forward to it.
Please
a data
bother
set
me.
I think you might enjoy, Josh, is our metered parking data in the open data portal. There we put together data from all the different ways that people can pay for parking. And we did it over 5 or 6 years. It's millions. I think it's probably 8 or 9 million records. For us, that's pretty big data. But some of them are meter based, some of them are zone based. The meters move. I mean, it was
Jamie, maybe you and Josh could have a conversation offline on the all the specifics.
Of course.
Sounds like
let me get your contact
in the chat.
information. I'll be in touch.
Okay, so Jackie and then Mike, and then we need to move to engagement because we have a lot more on the agenda, and I want to make sure that we move along. Okay, so Jackie, you're next, and then Mike, and
Yes.
you'll be the last.
Thank you. Jamie, you just said something that piqued my interest, and I guess I want to give a caution. You said we don't have the need to track people across our systems, but in fact, we have a very large case management requirement. And one of the things that's happening from trying to do a better job of integrating across law enforcement, mental health, and justice is, in fact, better case management across these multiple departments and systems, where what they're managing is personal, very specific personal data, and trying to keep it in real time. So, for example, I was listening to a committee reviewing all of those groups, talking about, that they're losing people between probation and a follow-up and these other things, where people were pleading with each other to give them a call when this happens. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of thing that there has to be a systematic data solution to how the important case management actions are passed from one department to the next and returned and visible. But it is certainly a very big challenge for privacy. And so I think that's one where we need to recognize that indeed we do have systems that intentionally track people throughout the entire system. And because we lack interoperability, some of those systems aren't working right now. So we need to get more interoperability, but we need to do it in a strategic way so that we're thinking about the privacy implications as we do that.
Jackie, it sounds like you need to join the coffee with Josh and I. I misspoke, or rather didn't speak well enough. What I meant is because you have a case in human services doesn't mean I need to know that you have a library card, and I don't need to know that you have a business license. And there are disparate systems that we don't need to connect for the purpose of connecting. And I agree 100% with your case management model and think it would also extend regionally and to the state. The problem is diverse and big and necessary to solve. In the cases where we need to have a holistic view of a person, different scenario. Absolutely.
Government groups like the hospital.
Yep, exactly.
You bring up an interesting point, Jackie. I just want to be very brief, but
Brief.
there is very brief. So there is an interesting case to be made about modeling of resource consumption and service utilization. If we wanted to think about government in terms of its ability to provide services to an individual, but there's obviously a great need to very seriously consider how to regulate that data such that or the usage such that it is only used to provide services without providing the state too much power to over-criminalize potentially or find ways to otherwise harm an individual, right? Because our goal is to protect individuals from the state, not necessarily to advance the interests of the state at the expense of individual freedom. So I'll just drop it at that.
Thanks, Josh. Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that although I know the task as defined here is a very broad gauge county-wide privacy policy, apparently the first of its kind that might take a long time to put in place. But we recently, particularly with John Burke's attention, brought some Johns Hopkins University thoughts about contract tracing in the pandemic environment. And so I think during that period of time, whatever the gestation is, we want to not fail to take advantage of what is urgent and what is rich with privacy questions. And so right now, there's a lot more contract tracing going on in Arlington. There's a lot more technology offerings, being made in that space. And although it might feel like jumping the gun a little, I'll bet we could get a lot smarter trying to do the privacy side of contract tracing well, fast, even if it's out ahead of the countywide policy, just because it's so rich with challenges around privacy that if you got that right, it would make many other things easier to get right going forward.
Agreed. Absolutely agree. I don't think we'll stop working on targeted efforts just because we're trying to come up with something broader.
Thanks, Jamie. Gee, there's no interest on this commission, right?
I can see that.
Not at all.
Right, exactly.
Thank you all so much for your attention and your feedback. It is incredibly helpful and really nice to speak to this group. I appreciate it.
Well, and we hope you'll come back, Jamie, for sure, because probably we could have, and we'll block out, unfortunately, we have about 7 more topics. And I want to make sure, Bernie, you have an opportunity to brainstorm about the engagement piece while it's fresh in people's minds. Okay.
Yeah. So I think, just a really quick round robin would be great. Just thoughts about this is, you saw, generate a lot of conversation here. It's a big conversation to have with the community. How do we do that in a way that, can't remember who said it, but the trust with and maintain trust in the conversation without getting people's kind of all anxious immediately. So
Big brother.
Yeah.
Looking at you, right. Open it up to the group. What do you think? What's the best way? What are some of the ways?
Yeah, I think just whoever wants to raise their hand or put it in the chat box, or you guys can just send me notes. Send all of us notes. Well, I can't do that.
Phil
but
Curran here. I don't have a solution to this, but I do think because there are so many moving parts to this, and it's obvious that full implementation is going to take a long time. We need to find some way to make some periodic reports to the citizens. And I'm wondering if you agree with that in principle. Regular reports of implementation progress.
Well, certainly I do agree with that. I think we want to try to move the actual content of the policy forward for public feedback. And so, you know, how do we do that? I think we could, what I hear you saying is maybe we take pieces of what Jamie has shared tonight about the progress and how we've gotten there with feedback to date.
And I'm thinking very specifically about what you are doing rather than what you intend to do or the policy framework in which you want to do it.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Others?
Yeah, and I think Denise mentioned, of course, civic associations. Burnham, that's a good conduit. John has a comment, and then I'll make one. Go ahead, John.
I really like the frame that Mike raised about consumer protection. I think that is really the right frame for many of the privacy issues that we see in the commercial marketplace today. And so that leads me to believe that it's more of a public safety, public awareness, public health campaign approach to here's what digital privacy in the digital privacy space is. Here's what Arlington County is doing about it. And we'd like your feedback if you think we're getting it right, because I think it's very technical and very nuanced, and many people don't really have an opinion or have even a frame of reference for it.
That's really helpful. So building on Phil's and expanding, I love the campaign aspect to it and laying out that. So thank you. You did use some framing about the question. Where are we getting it right, did you say?
Yeah, I think if you take the what do you want out of us approach, most people are going to draw a blank. They're going to be like, oh, I don't know, privacy, right? Because most people are not thinking about this issue deeply on a regular basis. If they're not a technology person, they're not involved in securing data on a regular basis.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And then, Bernie, you've seen the convenience, privacy, security. You can only pick two. You know, it's a triangle that we talk about, right? So that's the other thing, I think, in terms of having the public understand that there are trade-offs, right? That there is not one answer, that there's a trade-off between those three that are constantly moving, and it's important for the Arlington values to make those decisions where some of those lines are, because the lines are going to be different.
Security, and what was the third one?
It's convenience.
Convenience. Thank you.
Right.
I have a suggestion. There are also some hot topics that are coming up. I mean, this topic has been a hot topic for a while, but since the issue of data and privacy is one of the significant issues in the whole police practices group review, and it will come up in recommendations and discussions, I think you need to be thinking about how you work with that group, and which is, you know, the manager's group, but how you take what you've presented to us and help that frame, you know, how those issues are presented in that context. Because if you take an issue that's as highly sensitive as law enforcement, and that discussion kicks off before people have the background and the knowledge that you're working on all of this, it will go in a different direction than if you could frame that discussion as part of what you're proactively working on. It's already, you know, sort of, it's already in the frame of people are concerned that these are opportunities for violation of civil rights. So if it starts off that way and we don't say, and we're actively pursuing a policy so that we're addressing.
That's really helpful. Yeah, and I'm actually very active in the PPG work, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I just think you need to get a hold of that.
Okay.
now.
Mike and then Martha. John, did I skip over you? I didn't. Okay. Mike and then
Yeah.
Martha.
And I'll try to be concise. I do think there's great danger in going out for public engagement on the subject of privacy alone. Mostly a kind of kill the messenger risk, because many people don't think much about this. And if you're the person who causes them to think about it, they can associate it with you in a way that's not helpful, especially if you're an elected official.
Good
But I
point.
would say we always want to cage it or frame it in information technology offers lots of opportunities for the local government to further its mission. And in pursuing those advantages, we need to be careful that we don't hit these pitfalls, you know? So I wouldn't try to sell privacy in isolation. I'd try to sell privacy in the context of risks that can be managed in order to gain the operational efficiencies or the new
Convenience.
services. Yeah, but it better be, it's a kind of a what's in it for me answer. And then you get the prize, but you also get these risks that here's how we're going to manage. And then I would say in my lifetime, it's not too harsh to say it used to be impossible for private agencies to do the violations of privacy that I would judge them to be engaged in right now. And it was against the law for the government to do it. And it's become possible for the government to simply purchase it now from the private sector. That from a citizen point of view, doesn't seem like that much of an improvement to me. If you didn't want this happening and you didn't want it happening bad enough that you restricted governments from collections and usages of this type, but you didn't extend it to the private sector so that now government organizations simply purchase the information that they're by law prohibited from collecting and holding, that is not a victory. That is not consistent with the principles that were laid out back in the 70s around this. So I think you need to frame it in what's good about it and how this has to be one of the risks that managed in pursuing that, but also be very attentive to the fact that the private sector is, I'll bet you there are people who would want to do services for the for the county government in exchange for the data alone and no cash payment.
Right.
And so it's a new world and you got to think like that now.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Martha?
think there was one more.
Martha.
Well, some of this data is going to be temporary. I'm thinking of the last election. Did you get a ballot? Have you already voted? Are you dead? Stuff like that, I think, is going to be requested. Are you taking things and putting them into sort of two categories? One is we're setting up a system to track this and to have it integrate with this other stuff. And by the way, there's all this other stuff that is only temporary.
So I think that goes to retention, right, Jamie?
Yeah, I think so. As we look to whether something is a record or it is informing an immediate action. Is that what you're saying, the difference, Martha?
Yeah. And Arlington Alert is an example of it in a way. Because that's there's a tornado.
Right, that is situational.
Yeah.
And I think that's an area where we feel pretty confident, Bryna, that I think we have records that outline what we have to and where we have ambiguity. We would need to make our case if we needed to keep it beyond that temporal
Yeah, and the elections office, I mean, they have a ton of rules around that are completely, I haven't tried to figure out. But I know that it's indeed. We have taken a whole lot of time. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for your great work for the county, for your just active participation. And I hope you all have a great holiday.
Oh, thank you very much, Berna. And Jackie,
We'll
I
be
know
back.
you had you will be back. Jackie, I know you had a question. Do you want to put it in the chat so Berna at least sees it before she leaves?
No, I don't have one. I actually jumped the line and I apologize.
Oh, okay.
That's never happened before, Jackie. Never.
Well, thank both of you. And Richard, I'm glad you could come on as well. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you will come visit again. Happy holidays. Both of
Glad to be here. And I will remain for the rest of the meeting as usual. So I'm here if anything comes up.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, David, Hurley, we you wanted to make sure that you had, you briefed us on something, so you wanted to make an announcement, and I'll sneak that in before we look at the meeting minutes, okay?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mary. Just a real quick thing. If you haven't noticed, out on the public website, we posted a feedback form about the redesign that we're going to be doing. Well, we actually have started. It's your opportunity to provide your feedback. I know we've spoken this over the last, God, year and a half plus now, but it's now upon us. So now's the chance to have your feedback recorded. So I would encourage you to go out there. It's right on the banner. That's right on the top of the screen. Click on that. It's kind of you walk you through a multi-step thing. I think we've gotten about 125 plus entries already. We launched it last Friday, so that's actually pretty good. But all this feedback is being kind of pulled together. Speaking of data, we're pulling all that data together and taking a look at it and trying to incorporate that into the new website that will be coming next year. So please fill out your feedback. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you, David. Now wanted meeting minutes, and once again, thank you, Angela, the angel who does our meeting minutes. We're so happy because you don't know how many times we had to share doing it. So thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. Any adjustments, any comments, edits to the November minutes? Frank, you're on mute. Frank, you're on mute. We can't hear you. I think you're talking. Wait, Frank. Yeah, we can't hear you.
Maybe he's not talking to us.
Maybe he's not talking to us. Maybe not. Okay, we'll move forward then if he's not talking to us. Okay. Anything from the minutes? Anything?
I move to approve the minutes.
All right. Any second? Martha moved. Any second?
Second.
Denise seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Anyone opposed? Abstaining? Okay, ayes have it. Great, good, got through that. I'd like to welcome Cody, who's a guest tonight. He's looking at joining this Merry Band, putting in an application. So Cody, thanks for stopping by, and we think you're getting a good flavor about. We always have too much to do and not enough time. So, but welcome, Cody. Do you just want to give us a few minutes about your background, and then we'll move on?
Of course. Thank you, Mary, and thank you everyone for having me. It's been exciting. I was very pleased to see everyone discussing privacy and privacy principles. So that was good. Good way to be welcome to the committee. I'm currently a policy counsel with the Center for Democracy and Technology. I work with the Student Privacy Project there, so focusing on education privacy, data and education, and the ways that various adjacent areas such as the homework app can impact student privacy. Prior to my time at CDT, I was with the Federal Communications Commission. I was an attorney advisor in the Wireline Competition Bureau. At the time, I was in the Pricing Policy Division, which is a very small division that works on the old tariffing system for legacy landline telephones. So covered quite the spread of technology in my time. Previously, I was with a big law firm in Silicon Valley working on emerging technologies and startups. So I've seen quite the spread, but very, very interested in the commission and its work here. And as I said, very excited to be seeing its work in action.
Great. Thanks so much, Cody, and welcome. Just wanted to give you all a couple of updates because we did get some feedback from some of the things we've been doing. So, first, I just wanted to give a shout out to Mike and Frank. They found some articles that I'll share with you. Frank's found quite a few articles about Alexandria's broadband thank you, Jack, for your foresight and Connect Arlington, because the amount of money Alexandria is looking at right now is significant. So it just goes to prove vision and strategy together and implementing is a good thing. And then Mike found one on technology playing a role in evictions that I want to share with you all, something that we want to look at and monitor. So I'll be sending that out. The also wanted to let you know I was part of a focus group for the police chief. They're putting together kind of the quality list. What would the ideal candidate look like? And there was some really good discussion about what this police chief, what the qualities and behaviors. So I was real glad to participate and glad that we could play a role. I also the legislative priorities that we put together and sent to the board in early November, around November 2nd, they actually adopted one of them. The digital equity one is part of the legislative agenda. It's under education and general government section. And what it was, you remember we said that there needed to be the affordability. It wasn't access as much for us in Arlington, but it needed to be affordable. And so that is part of Arlington's state legislative priorities. So just wanted you to know that was really, really helpful, and they adopted our recommendation in principle. And then we had also brought up digital records management. John, you were asking around that question. The Arlington County Police Department has already engaged in this to some degree, and there's concern that the Library of Virginia isn't the right place and might not be the right agency to do this, but we'll follow up and have Arlington County Police Department come back, the right people to let us know about that update, John, because that's something that we want to see. And then, Mike, you were talking about the reasonable telephone fees are for families who are calling people who are incarcerated. They're handling that directly with the sheriff's office. And also there's a bill by Delegate Hope that's addressing this matter. So we just need to keep track of that and see where that is. Also, you all remember that that Mike presented the what we call the 12th element for the master plan, strategic plan for Arlington. The board is going to look at that next week when they talk about their organizational, how they want to move forward. So it's going to consider it as part of their 2021 organizational deliberations that digital planning be added. So obviously we'll keep track of that, but that got introduced because of the work all of you did. And then tech privacy, which of course is something that we've talked a lot about, but we did get feedback. We sent the letter to the county board around, particularly with John's initiative, particularly around the principles guiding that. And Dr. Varghese, who's the medical officer, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, was familiar with what principles we suggested, but he didn't see any governance issues and felt that the board needed to address. So we're going to go back around and talk about that. We're not going to do that tonight, but I just wanted to put that in a placeholder in terms of the particular governance issues that we advise the board to consider. So I think we just need to go one step further with these are some things that we think need to be looked at and why the framework, if I'm reflecting the sense of the board commission correctly, what we wanted to make sure is the board was aware of a principle framework in order for them to be able to consider some of these issues. So we will revisit that, but I just wanted you to know where that stood. So people are definitely paying attention. The final one is around budget because we wanted to get some feedback around budget. And Christian Dorsey in particular said one of his key budget priorities for FY22 was to ensure that our cyber investment nets are sufficient to guard against sufficient risk. Right, so that's something he wanted this commission to make sure and look at as we look at the budget preparations. And of course, that's something that we just wanted to briefly touch on. Obviously, we'll do more in January but to prepare for that budget discussion. And David, do you have David and Jack? Do you want to give any? I think you all have been asked to do a reduction in budget, and it looks like it's what we call the salami approach. It's just everybody has to take X% cut. Is that? Do you want to just give us some an update on where we are, what guidance you're receiving right now?
Yeah, let me take the lead. This is Jack. Yeah,
Thanks,
we've been
Jack.
all asked to propose our cuts, and we have to take a 6% cut, which is equivalent to $1.5 million in our budget. And it's a challenge because it's across the board. Every department is having to do the same thing. But as you know, it's we're a different department than we were pre-March. The things we're working on, we're in different lines of business. And I have the opinion, I think the manager as well, that in this era we're in right now, investments we made in March may not be necessarily investments we need to make in January and February of this year coming forth. I mean, this is a long haul we're in, and we've become more virtual as a county, and we're in different lines of business that David's been taking the lead on, whether it be courts or it be involvement with schools. We're arm in arm with the schools. We're racing right now, as you may know, may not know, and we'll talk about it in the next meeting, to implement enhanced access for students who may not have access to the internet. And we've got a shot clock of December the 24th. And I have to tell you, I can't be as proud of my staff. We often talk about government staff not being willing to stand up and do the difficult work. My staff are full out, both on working with the schools, both on the Columbia Pike area to provide for that access, and in the gates of Ballston and other areas where there's really deficient internet access. And to see these folks working as they are is really you as a county. I think we all should be proud of the work they're doing. But so going forward, what do we do? And sort of this discussions we talked about with Jamie, data, security, there, as much as we try to keep our focus on doing the important thing of moving the county forward for the future. We have these incursions to take, this noise that takes place, as we had last weekend with the significant incursion at the federal level with the Russian interaction, and we have to turn our attention to those types of things. So the proposed cuts, they will significantly reduce our ability to continue doing our work. But again, I think the manager is looking at it from the perspective of, where do we do investments? Where do we make investments going forward? So yet to be defined. Right now, it's December. We're probably talking a later scenario in terms of making the budget available for public review. But your support has always been there, and we can use it again going in the future. So thank you.
Thanks, Jack. And John, I know you had a question.
Yeah, Jack, when we first reconvened and you briefed us about the work that you guys had done with the Department of Health in terms of automating their contact tracing operation and really spinning up the velocity at which they were able to execute that. You said this is a great example of digital transformation. And I would say from a budget standpoint, cybersecurity is an easy talking point, but digital transformation is where the government needs to go. And if we're cutting our investments in that, that's problematic for us long term. So I'd love to hear about what investments and what priorities we have in that space so that we can advocate on your behalf that they are strategically important in good times and in bad.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Yeah, that's exactly it. But again, it's like anything. There are, the interests that want to invest as they have in the past, and it's rightly so. But, it's we're in a different norm right now, and so we'll see how it falls out. So thank you, though.
So we'll keep apprised. Mike, you wanted a comment or a question?
Yeah, more of a comment, Jack. I know it's inherently difficult in this forum to talk about anything substantive in cybersecurity. So I'll just mention a couple of things that I hope will show up in the budget, knowing that this is not the right forum to talk about them. But I would say protecting the money that covers the cost of hygiene so that Arlington doesn't become a victim of some preventable incursion would seem to be obvious to me. Being particularly prepared for a ransomware scenario sounds like the bigger risk. And then the question of cyber security insurance. I don't know the answers to those. I don't think this is the right forum to share the answers to those. But I would, from a budget perspective, say, hang on to the hygiene, be ready for the ransomware, and have a clear picture about whether you want to insure against this risk or not.
Yeah, no, you're entirely right. I mean, this recent incursion that took place. I know Richard can talk more eloquent than I can on this. Richard, and please step in at any point here and take over. But this is the last thing that happened this weekend is a nation-state attack. It's less likely to be a ransomware attack by a couple of hackers who want to get money out of a government. They're in for the long term, and they want to achieve some other things. And as you know, you look around, your next door neighbors are some pretty important people. And be able to get information on them, compromise, their activities to find out if their children may have been picked up on a drug charge or he'd done something wrong in finances, puts them at risk. And so we have to be really careful. Richard, do you want to talk a little bit about what you can, because I know you're really well deep in it, but what you've been getting guidance on?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting very similar guidance to what you are seeing leak into the mainstream press at this moment. We're getting a little bit more specific detail about what to look for to determine how wide the infection was. But as far as the actual impact, we're seeing very similar. Nation state, this is a classic espionage play. And, the net was cast very wide and caught a lot more organizations than I think the intent was. But I don't think they're unhappy they caught as many organizations as they did. I think this is, an unintended positive consequence for the hackers and the nation state actors, just not for the rest of us. I think the way I've described this is a once in a decade kind of occurrence, hopefully stays once in a decade type of occurrence.
OPM was only 5 years ago.
Yes, this is a little bit different though. This is a supply chain attack.
Okay.
And so we trust our vendors and our partners to provide us clean code. And this is a very different type of intrusion. For those of us in the networking world, this is as if a product like a Microsoft were attacked. It's just so ubiquitous. It is everywhere.
The NSA did supply chain attacks in 2013 and 2014, allegedly. So, yeah. But anyway, continue.
Okay. So anyways, this is the type of thing we are worried about and we prepare for. So going forward, we will keep an eye out and we'll be very vigilant about what we're learning from our federal partners and our industry partners, and we'll be looking to make sure Arlington is safe and protected.
Great. Thanks very much, Richard. Appreciate it. Given our time, what I will do is send around some items to include in 2020 commission reports just to get you all started. And then if you could react to that, that would be good. Frank, I don't want you to be shortchanged. I know you've got quite a few pieces, so take it away. You're on mute, Frank. Frank, you're on mute.
Oh boy.
Frank.
Frank may have audio problems.
Can you unmute him, Mary?
I'm looking. I don't think
Mary can't unmute him.
I think it looks like he's probably having a device.
Yeah.
Gee,
the wrong audio
technology,
device.
right?
Yeah.
So Frank, if you hit the three dots, you can click Show Device Settings, and under Show Device Settings, you can choose your input device, so you can reset the microphone that you need to do as your input device, and that should help.
Yeah, I think he was talking before. Remember when, Phil, we weren't sure whether he was talking to us or someone else, and we didn't. So, Frank, I know this is frustrating, and I know you have good stuff.
Frank, if all else fails, you can call in. You can drop from the teams and call in.
That's true. You can.
So there is the audio bridge.
Yeah.
Am I on now?
Yeah.
Am I on now?
Go.
Yep. Okay, so, all right. Thank you, Microsoft. Thank you.
Well
Changing settings on the fly. Anyway,
there aren't many people who get all that tech help. I mean, look at it. You got the.
That's right. No, that was helpful. Thank you.
help. Yes.
I logged out and back on, I'd be on. Anyway, and also what I was trying to say before was there was an extra legislative report in the minutes. I think somehow the October legislative report made it into Tim's section in the.
Okay, I wondered about that. All right, so we can make that. You'll get with Angela to make it make that change.
Right.
Thank
Yeah. Well, that's all the comment was. I had given her my comments on the November report. Anyway, following up on the November report, we do have a little more clarity where the FCC is going to be come January 20th. FCC Chairman Ajit Pai has announced he will be leaving on January 20th. So we do have another change there on the Republican side. Mike O'Reilly, longtime second seniority on the Republican side, has left. His replacement has been confirmed, Nathan Symington, and this was all related to that Section 230 kerfuffle that I had mentioned. He is now on. I think we're going to wind up with a 2-2 deadlock basically on the FCC until a third Democratic commissioner can be confirmed, and typically the new president will name his chair. And as I had mentioned previously, the most likely contenders are Jessica Rosenworcel, who is the senior Democrat on the FCC, Mignon Clyburn, who is on the FCC review team, daughter of Jim Clyburn. I think there's speculation if she wants it, she's got a good chance of getting it. And then a third, contender is Jeffrey Starks, who is the other Democrat on the FCC currently. And then there's the fourth possibility, none of the above. So we'll stay tuned on that one. I guess one of our issues is the closing the affordability gap on the digital divide, and we expect that there is going to be money for broadband grants on that issue in the COVID relief bill. We know that rural has been a big part of that, and there's been a lot of action on that side. But we're seeing some activity that would, give the FCC greater flexibility to use E-rate funding outside of the narrow constraints that have been there before. So, stay tuned on that one. The Virginia House has passed HB 831 to declare that it is the policy of the Commonwealth that use of electric and communications easements to provide and expand broadband is in the public interest. Basically, it's similar to some of the FCC actions. Basically, it is looking to generally encourage broadband deployment, and Attorney General Herring is defending that bill. Broadband is expected to be part of the infrastructure stimulus package going forward in this President-elect Biden's first 100-day agenda. And I think it's an area where there is likely to be some bipartisan support. There's even talk about bringing back earmarks. Wow. Talk about throwback. The Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions, ATIS, standards organization, has developed recommendations to help ensure that wireless emergency alerts, WEAs, reach all and only those in the affected areas during emergencies. Currently, the entire area must be covered with only an overshoot of 1/10 of a mile, only about 500 feet is what the current standards, and if there is encouragement to basically improve upon that. So that's all I've got for now, but obviously we're in a period of great flux, and I think we'll hopefully see some new actions come January.
Yeah, so we will have a new president by the time we meet again.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I think we're at the end. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I still move.
All right, Phil, anyone second?
I second.
Second.
Thank you. All
Happy
those
holidays,
in favor?
Mary.
Thanks so much. Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, take care
Thank
now.
you.
Be safe.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Happy
work.
holidays all.
Good work. I'll be sending you emails.
Okay.
Hey, Mary, I sent you an email
I
about.
did. I responded.
You responded?
I did. I responded, and we'll put it in next month.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Martha. You all take care.
All right.
Happy
Merry
holidays.
Christmas.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you, Martha. Did you see my Noel? Did you see my Noel cup? See?
Ah,
No.
Yeah. I was being festive. All right. Good. Now on to my next meeting.
Hey, Jackie, I'm going to call you.
All right. Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Frank,
All right. Thanks.
I'll touch base about our list. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. I guess our report will be shorter than most years there. Which is a good thing, I guess, in some ways. Now that we have to produce it.
You look tired, my friend. Are you hanging in there?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but yeah. So how many more meetings you have tonight? 2? Oh, that's not bad.
Only 2, I think. There might be a third, but I'm hoping just for 2.
And I think we will have to get with Angela as far as the website, because I don't see those other meetings on there. You know, she said that we had the video. You know.
Yeah, she's working hard to get that done. So yeah, let's yeah,
I don't know if there's another link or like parallel site, because when I go on,
right, that's what it. So she's gonna work on that, and the good news is now that it's kind of downtime, she'll be able. And then probably after the first of the year, Frank will do a team chat like this, and she can share and see where it is. That'll be good.
Right. And I think we probably do. We know what's going on with AIM?
We have to do that. Let me.
Yeah, I did reach out to Gary Thayer. Yeah. So
good. All right. That's another good. And it looks like Raj will come as well. You know, to give us an update.
Oh, did Raj?
He hasn't responded. Did Raj? I mentioned. Jack seemed to think that would happen, so we'll follow up with that as well.
Okay, that'd be a good one in January too. Then, as the students come back. All right.
Thanks.
All right. Good luck with your meetings. All
Merry
right.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
All right. Bye.